Okay, and here's a look at our upper intake manifold. These gaskets, probably original gaskets, they're pretty flat, but I mean I don't see any obvious signs of it leaking. This side is it's the throttle body side. These rubber O-rings are kind of badly worn, but we didn't have any leaks on that side. So yeah, whatever is causing the leak on this side is, if not these guys, little plastic tubes, it's going to be the lower intake manifold. So we are going to have to remove this lower intake manifold as well. Okay, so in order to remove this lower intake manifold, besides those little bolts that hold it in place, we are going to have to remove this EGR hose. Okay, and these are 13 millimeter. And when you go to remove these, there's probably going to be a gasket that you probably don't want to lose. So keep that in mind. Oh, actually, there might not be a gasket in this case. Really, you want to be careful and not bend this that much, because if they're old, they're really brittle, they'll break, and then you're gonna have to go chase one down. So be very careful with these. Next up, I'm going to remove this thermostat housing, which is held in place by two 10 millimeter bolts. And you might want to put a catch pan underneath because you might have a leak from here too. Okay, and here's our thermostat and this rubber gasket. Of course, we're going to remove and replace this while we're at it. Okay, now we're going to remove this bracket for the front torque mounts from the lower intake. Yeah, just noticed something. These two bolts for the front torque mount, and they don't go through the lower intake manifold actually, so you don't have to remove them. So what we're going to do next is remove these all these bolts around the circumference of the lower intake manifold, and there's two on the insides too. There's one in here, you can probably see, and there's one on that corner inside there. Okay, so okay, I think that's all we need to remove. All the bolts we need to remove to take this lower intake manifold out, but make sure you get a catch pan underneath because I still see coolant inside here, especially since in our case we couldn't really thoroughly drain our cooling system. Okay, and so I'm gonna just pull on this. Maybe not. Make sure when prying, there we go, you rest it against a solid piece of metal, otherwise you're going to break or bend something. Maybe we do have to remove these front torque mounts after all. Okay, let's remove this bracket first, see if we get any more wiggle room. There we go. Alright, let's try this now. Yeah, I think. Yes. I gotta find a way. Okay, you know what, actually? You want to stuff some rags where your thermostat is, because otherwise the coolant is gonna get out and might get into your runners and whatnot. Okay? Make sure you get that all clogged up, and then get this out of here. Okay, and here's where the lower intake manifold sits, and as you can see, there's a bunch of corrosion and stuff here that need to toss out. And these are original gaskets, and they need to be replaced. But what I've noticed is that the lower intake manifold, at least, the only where that it could leak coolant on the passenger side is where this goes into. And this is cracked here, and it was leaking as you saw earlier, and it needs to be replaced. But that's it, that's all I could see. I mean, on the upper intake I couldn't really see any coolant passages either on this side, which is funny because I read online a couple places that your intake manifold gaskets might leak coolant on this side. But I don't see anything. Maybe someone with experience with these engines can shed some light on this. But if you do have a coolant leak on this side, which is 90% of the time, it's probably this guy, and it's other plastic rudder on the other side of the tensioner. Okay. Okay, so let's remove these old gaskets, shall we? Yeah, also great idea to cover this lower side because you want to prevent all this crap getting, you know, all over the place. Okay. All right. Okay, here's our lower intake manifold out, and see what we got here. This is where all that corrosion was on the cylinder head side. This is actually supposed to be, I believe, it's supposed to be flat, and it's supposed to be a dead end for coolant passage. Kind of this one. This one, as you can see, it's got where the coolant travels through here probably, and down in there. But this side, both this and this here, I think that they're supposed to be flat, or actually like squared shaped or something, and not like this. As you can see, it has corroded badly into a shape that is not squared at all. It doesn't have even edges. In fact, if we put this gasket back on here, it will probably, even with a new gasket, will probably not seal at all. So we are going to need a new lower intake manifold. Yeah, probably all that corrosion that was on that side and on in here. I cleaned this up actually. Really, I cleaned this up as much as I could. All that corrosion, all that residue was probably sealing it. Now, if we go to put this back in, its water is going to start seeping from around these edges because they're not even and it's not flat. So yeah, gonna have to look for one of these. It's probably going to be $100 or so. Also add to that complete new gasket set. But on the bright side, we'll cut down our cleaning time. I was not looking forward to cleaning that anyway, but yeah, I mean, it's one way to look at it. Okay. Alrighty, so all the parts we need for to complete this job are finally here. Let's start with this part. This is obviously your lower intake manifold. This is part number, I wrote it down here, 615280. It's made by Dorman, and it came with this little cap that goes on the back, so you don't have to move it from your old one. Obviously, you'll have to remove this bracket. This is for the bracket for the thermostat housing that we had to move. You need to move this from the old one to this one. Also, your coolant temperature sensor, you need to move that over as well. And last but not least, you need to remove these bolts. These are where your fuel rail connects to. You need to remove these. You'll need a 4mm socket for these. Ideally, you want to use a Torx socket, but if you have just a regular 4mm socket, this will do because they're not they're not that tight. So you can just move them over. And here's your your gaskets for the lower intake manifold. These are, I had to go get these from the dealer. They cost about $65. Yeah. And here's the part number for these. These are the upgrade for these gaskets. They are made out of aluminum, and here's the part number for them. These are by AC Delco, and there's the GM and the AC Delco part numbers, which are the same. Okay. Oh, by the way, this lower intake manifold costs about $260, and here's how it's supposed to look like on the side, on the lower side. See how we have a coolant passage here? On this side, it's supposed to be flat, as I suspected. On our old one, oh yeah, not so flat. It's really bad. So yeah, there's no point in doing this job without replacing the lower intake manifold gasket, because this is gonna leak coolant, and it's gonna be a mess. I'm gonna have to do it over again. So yeah, I had no choice but to go buy this. And here's our gasket set for upper intake manifold. It comes with obviously the gasket. It comes with this plastic tube. It comes with this gasket for the throttle housing, throttle body housing. Comes with thermostat O-ring, fuel injector. That's not it. Fuel injector O-rings, and there's also your fuel injector O-rings. This is for your EGR valve, which we are not going to need. And this was also made by Dorman. Part number was, okay, yeah, part number 615-207. And this cost about $55, I believe. And last but not least, here's the pipes that go to your through your tensioner housing. These are made out of aluminum as well, and they will last a lot longer than the plastic ones at the factory, from the factory. Okay, and these were separate. This is not part of this gasket. It was at AutoZone, also made by Dorman again. 47065 HP is the part number, and they cost about $12. Okay. Okay, so before we put on our intake manifold, while there's still room up here, I decided to go ahead and replace these old plastic fittings. But what happened was, as I went to take this out, this started breaking apart, and actually the tip of this broke off in there, and I had to spend a good couple minutes getting that out with a pick and screwdriver and whatnot. But after you get that out, what you want to do is make sure it's all nice and clean in there. If you have to, get a piece of sanding paper and smooth it all out, get an old O-ring out of the here if it's, if yours broke in here too, and do the same thing for the one that goes on the bottom as well. Okay, and then you want to fit these in. You can wet these down with some coolant, so it makes going in and out easy. And what you want to do is just basically press these in, and they should press in place without a problem. There we go. There's one side in. Now we get the lower side, and then when we put the intake manifold on, obviously these will go in place. Okay, so this lower one broke in there as well, so be prepared to wrestle with these. If you're replacing these, just these, they're gonna break off both inside their housing and inside the tensioner, so be prepared to spend some time removing these. Okay, so next you want to obviously clean the surface. You want to use a razor blade, some brake clean, and also keep that towel in there. And since we had a lot of crud build up there, make sure you catch all of that. If you have a vacuum, go ahead and vacuum the inside of this area. Then you want to put on your lower intake manifold gaskets, and these will be held in place by these little tabs here at the bottom. They go into the cylinder head, and it keeps them in place as such. See, now it's not going to go anywhere. And obviously I got this one already on this side. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is put on these seals that go at the end of this area. When I took the old ones off, they had some RTV silicone on there, both on the bottom side, especially around the corners, and both on the upper side, especially around the corners again. So that's what I did. I put some RTV silicone here. I also spread a thin layer on the bottom just to make sure we won't get any leaks. And then we're just going to put that on there and do the same thing for the other side. There we go. And now on the other side, put some RTV silicone here and here in this corner. Okay. Now same thing on the other side. Okay, next we put on our lower intake manifold gaskets. These gaskets come with these little tabs that will hold them in place, which is great. And there's that side. And there's this side. So they're going to be in place while we put in our lower intake manifold. Okay, and here's our lower intake manifold. If you are not replacing yours, make sure you've thoroughly cleaned this. And there we go. Oh, there's a cable in the way. Come on. There we go. I think we got it. Yeah, make sure you put your fingers down here, make sure the gasket hasn't moved. And what you want to do next is start running in the bolts. Okay, well, that wasn't a big fail. Yeah, so the bolt holes for the lower intake manifold would just not line up with the cylinder head. So I think what I have to do is actually remove this bracket. I mean, it was okay while it stayed here for removing it because you could just slide it out, but you need to adjust the intake manifold to line up all the bolt holes. So actually gonna have to remove it. Next we're gonna come to the back of it, and there's two 15mm bolts that hold this in. We're gonna remove these next and then just flip this up so there's plenty of room down there. Okay. Alright, there we go. Okay, so now with this bracket lifted up, there should be plenty of wiggle room down there to fit on our new intake manifold. You know, I could have probably forced it, but at the same time, I didn't want to risk, damaging any of the threads and having to fix that. So, you know, whenever you run into these problems, you know, whenever you can't easily fit a bolt into a hole, things are not lining up, you know, take your time. If you have to take things out, like I did, I just had to remove those seals, remove the RTV silicone from them and whatnot, but it still beats damaging threads on the cylinder head and, you know, having to go fix that problem plus do all the other stuff again. So yeah, you want to, you know, keep that in mind. Okay, and here's take two, and hopefully we are not going to have any issues, and we don't seem to be. Yep, all the bolt holes look like they're all lining up without any issues. You're still gonna have to wiggle them a little bit, I'm sure, but they all should work fine now. Let's do a test run here. There we go. That one's going in easy. Okay, so we're gonna get the threads started, get our bolts started by hand. But first, you're going to need some thread locker. What I'm going to use is some medium strength blue thread locker by Permatex, and yeah, you need to just clean your bolts and just apply some thread locker, and then start them by hand. Okay. Okay, so after getting all the bolts started by hand, it's time to tighten them down by hand. There's a bolt pattern you need to follow. Here's a printout that I got. It's as you can see, it starts in the middle and then it goes towards the left, or the passenger side in our case, and then goes back out to the right. So you want to follow this bolt pattern, and you just want to hand tighten them using your ratchet. Okay. Then after we hand tighten them by our ratchet, following this bolt pattern, we're gonna come back and torque him down to 11 foot-pounds. Okay. Okay, now following the same pattern, you want to torque him down to 11 foot-pounds. Okay, so with all these torqued down, we're going to put this bracket back on. Make sure you start them by hand, all the 4 bolts, these 2 up front and both the 2 in the back, and then just tighten them down.